Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dollar Auction Show with Shimon and Alex. Shimon, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I feel like I'm living in the future because I just drove home for 4 hours from New York, or should I say, I did not drive. I let my car drive for me. It was pretty good. I mean, the autopilot is getting on the Tesla. It's getting much better. And on the way back, I stopped at the Apple Store to get a live demo of the Apple Vision Pro, which came out today, and
How
it
was it?
blew my mind.
Tell me more. I haven't tried it.
Okay, so it completely blew my mind in the sense this is an iPhone moment. So just like, you had BlackBerry, you had other smartphones. I don't remember before the iPhone, did you have smartphones with the touch screen, or was the iPhone
Mm-mm.
the first one? Okay, so I guess yeah, it's the iPhone moment because like the Meta Quest, which I had experienced over Christmas, my brother-in-law bought a Meta Quest 3. It's pretty cool. So you can see augmented reality. So you can see people sitting on the couch, and then you can have like things on top of the people, and you shoot little balls and whatever. It's really cool. But two problems. One is, I mean, not problems, but two things that make it way worse than the Apple one. One is the resolution is much lower. So Apple is like 8K HD, like something crazy. It really looks like the real world. And then the other thing is the controllers. So with Meta, you have to hold these two things, and each of them have like several buttons on the top, and they have like triggers and stuff. And so it's kind of clunky. Versus the Vision Pro, it's pretty crazy. So you put it on, and you the cursor follows your eyes. So with the MetaQuest, you have to use your controller to point at something, and then you click on it. Versus with the Apple Vision Pro, you basically do like this with your fingers, and it knows that you're doing this with your fingers. So you can do this to click, you can do this to expand, and this to like contract,
Without
but
any controllers?
any controller. So it's literally you
Wow,
just have the headset, and then the crazy thing is that to click on something, you just have to look at it and do this. So like literally the
that's kind
iPhone
of
that you look
crazy.
at, or for example, they say, and it's nice because Apple, first of all, kudos to them because they're spending so much money on these demos. I had a dedicated person sitting next to me for half an hour, and
Wow,
you have to like make an appointment. I was lucky because I live near Annapolis, which is not a big city, so like I went in there and I got an appointment for 15 minutes later. But I'm assuming that in New York or San Francisco, it would probably take you a few days to get an appointment. But you basically get the appointment, person sits next to you and he just walks you through it. And so it's insane because like first of all the resolution, second of all you can control the environment, so you can either see transparently and then you just see the icons overlaid on top of like the real world, or you can change the background to like you're sitting on top of Mount Everest, and then you're doing your Twitter, because it takes over your whole vision, right? And to be fair, MetaQuest could do the same thing, but with MetaQuest it's just much lower resolution, so you don't really feel. Basically, MetaQuest, it's nice for vector games, like video games, because then it's like animated. But this, you literally feel that Mount Everest, like 8K,
so
whatever. I'm not
cool.
a graphics person, so I don't know exactly the specifications. It felt real. And then the craziest thing is that they have these like spatial videos that you can only record. I mean, the best ones you can only record with the Apple Vision Pro itself. So you can literally see a mother playing with her kids, and you feel that you're between them, and that's just a video like on the iPhone that you record. And then there's videos that they made demos, and this is why I'm not going to buy, I think, this version, mainly because I want for people to have chances to create more content for it, because the coolest things were only demos, so stuff on Apple TV that Apple recorded especially for that. But it was crazy. It's like you're in a safari, a rhino comes to you and it looks like real life. It's not an avatar of a rhino. It's like did we speak about the Lex Friedman interview with Mark Zuckerberg where they
No.
scan? Okay,
Oh
so
yeah, I saw that they were in the metaverse.
so this is like 10 times better, if you can imagine. And with Zuckerberg, it was like, yeah, there's all these devices that scan your face. This is literally, you feel that you're in the room with the rhinos and the safari, or with the sharks under the ocean. It's just like crazy. So my point is, this will open a huge ecosystem of augmented reality finally. Like finally, this can be, you can pay a subscription, a really expensive subscription, to make your sky look like cotton candy on your commute to work. You know what I mean? It's like it just like opens, and that's why I think this is why the Nasdaq is going up today. We're recording on Friday, the February 2nd. I really think people are not pricing this thing in. They just don't realize how much economic potential there's there, and it's not about like videos showing you the engine and how to fix an engine. I think that's like a very niche use case. The main use case will be video games, movies, hang out with your family that's like on the other side of the world, like stuff like that. I mean, and the economic potential is huge. It's still super expensive, so it's $3,500 before any upgrades. And from what I understand, most people will probably need some kind of, like, for example, if you have eyeglasses, they have a
Yeah.
machine in the Apple Store that you put your eyeglasses on the machine, it automatically figures out the lenses, and then they order a special Apple Vision Pro with the lenses that fit your eyesight. So I thought that's
Wow.
pretty cool. They're basically really, really good at retail. I was like, hats off to them. They're really good at product design, but they're also really good at retail. Like they had the foresight to have a machine in the store where you can put your glasses and it just like orders the right lens for you. And then like they ship the Apple Vision Pro to you at home, personalized to you. So it's pretty cool. What are
It's
your
so
thoughts?
cool. Well, look, I mean, I haven't really experienced it, but what I did experience in 20, like 16, 17, was Microsoft's HoloLens, which is the original kind of AR play. Look, AR is hard. I remember the hardest part was projecting the color black. It's very hard to project the color black.
They
And
did it.
then sorry?
They did it perfectly on Apple Vision Pro. You
Yeah,
can
look,
like
it's 10
black.
years later. It's 10 years later. But I remember playing games where like these things are coming out of the wall and it knows the wall, the chair, and all these things, and you're shooting. It was really cool, but it was a big thing, and you got to plug in, and you had all these wires. But it's always like this tech, it improves, it improves, it improves. Yeah, I mean, augmented reality soon will have like a eyeglasses or whatnot, and we'll be able to have them plugged in, kind of see where you're walking and what you're doing, and I'm excited for that. I mean, it will just be, it's going to be fairly revolutionary, shocker, and obviously, but um, yeah, I'm just kind of thinking about what are the, like, you can have. I was watching this little demo. Somebody was vacuuming and all these coins on the floor, and then when you vacuum, you suck up the coins. It gamifies things. It makes things fun. But I could see, on one hand, people going off into this world. You're always going to be living in augmented reality. On the other hand, it could be very helpful. Like you're walking, it shows you directions. Like right as you're walking and where you're going, you have this chip. It's like you go here and here, or live translation of, like, you're in Japan and you don't speak Japanese. It's like a live translation of where you're going, right? Or AI will like be incorporated here, will figure out like danger zones, or there's just so much. We're gonna become bionic humans, Neuralink in our brains, and augmented reality.
I mean, we already are. That's why my moment of like I texted you like 7 text messages one after the other because I was like, yeah, I don't know when it happened, but suddenly I have a car that drove itself to the Apple store, and then I had this. It's just like it kind of sneaks up on you, and like it's also people are dunking on the technology, before it's good enough, but then one day it becomes good enough, and then it's
Yeah,
like, wow, because like you have all these people that say, oh, it's too heavy, that my neck hurts, my this, my that. It's like, okay, give it 5 years, like
yeah. You know what industry is gonna pick this up first, right? Porn for sure. You're
automotive.
gonna, yeah,
No.
automotive. It, Pornography with this. I mean, actually, when we talked about this, a lot of new tech, pornography not only picks up but also drives, because, well, it's a very high willingness to pay, very inelastic um, demand. But wow, I just the new possibilities, or learning. Think about education. we were actually talking about this at work today, but somebody came up with the idea. Imagine your kids can just sit in the classroom, right? Everybody puts like HoloLens and they're studying the Constitution, and then they get whatever the Apple, what is it called? Not the HoloLens, the Apple
Vision
Vision Pro.
Pro.
Yeah. And you're sitting there, and all of a sudden you get transported into the room during the debate of the Declaration of Independence, and the people are signing it, and you're sitting there with the founding fathers, and you're experiencing it, or like talking about ancient Egypt, and what it was like with the pharaohs, and you can actually experience it. And I think that maybe on one hand, I'm kind of thinking out loud as we're talking, it could actually drive some empathy because instead of just reading about a situation, you can feel that situation. You can kind of be in it and be like, oh, I can see that perspective, and I can see this. Movies too are going to be incredible. Gaming is going to be incredible. You're going to have like in an arena, you're just walking around like pretend, first person shooters, or it'll be amazing. But you definitely need a lot of space for it.
Speaking of the founding fathers, I hope the augmented reality doesn't also transport the smell because I heard they didn't shower a lot.
We will soon have augmented smell reality, augmented smellarity.
The nice thing
Oh,
is, like, I was at a work event yesterday in New York, and I was talking to a finance guy, and we were talking about the Apple Vision Pro, and he said, "Okay, I'm willing to try anything as long as it's not an implant in my brain." And I'm like, "Wow, that's the level of the conversation." It's like it's an actual possibility to have an implant in your brain that will generate visions within your brain,
a
and
few days ago it happened.
yeah, I know, but my point is, like, that's the red line, the Overton window of, like, it. No, it's pretty cool. So, what do you think though about back to the stock market? Do you think it's overvalued? Do
Mhm.
you think? I mean, we've had crazy, crazy, crazy rips in the Nasdaq and the S
I
and
think it's overvalued a little bit. So, for example, Nvidia, I mean, it went from in a month from like 450, 420 to 650. Why did it gain 50% in a month? I mean, I really don't understand. Uh, we
Isn't it
can.
Facebook said that they bought like billions of dollars of their cards to train their models?
Oh, is it? I actually
Yeah,
don't know, but like,
so Facebook had a Meta had an earnings call, and
yeah.
Zuckerberg said on the earnings call that, like, we have, like, basically the nice thing about AI now is that, okay, you have the corpus that everybody trains on, which is the text on the internet. That's not interesting because everybody has that, and it's also open source. And by the way, we should talk. We promised last week our listeners that we'll talk about open source AI at some point, but
You should.
um, he said, look, in Instagram, we have like all these pictures and all these things. And so he's basically buying billions of dollars worth of NVIDIA chips to train their AI. And so maybe that's why NVIDIA, basically, people were like, before it was like gaming, then it became cryptocurrency mining, then it became
Yeah.
like AI now. And we're just figuring out that as AI grows, NVIDIA grows together with it.
Nvidia rides all of the trends, all of the coolest trends.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, now I don't own individual stocks, but I remember, like, I recommended Nvidia to a family friend like in 2014 or 15 or something, and every time he sees me, he's like, "Thank you for recommending Nvidia."
By the way, let's talk about open source AI, and then I want to bring up an economics point at some point, and I want you to react to. But let's go to OpenAI first. So I think last time, where did we leave off? We talked about open source versus closed source AI.
So to recap, right, this is Balaji Srinivasan's thesis that you would have three types of AI. You would have the Chinese, like, communist AI that has a lot of
Oh
data, a lot
yeah,
of high quality data, but it doesn't necessarily transfer to the West. Then you'll have Western AI, which is like OpenAI and Meta and all these guys, which is like the data is less structured and more kind of lower quality, but they also have a lot of data. And then you can have someone like India basically saying, "Look, and he gave the example of India. I don't know why India. I mean, I guess they do this with pharmaceuticals, but they can basically say, look, come to India, train your, like, models on, like, stuff we don't care about IP. So then
yeah.
you download all the songs from like you can download them illegally and just like train your data on all the stuff, which the Chinese can't do because you can then, sue them in court, and then Americans also can do it because you sue them in court. And so then you basically have three AIs competing with each other, and the nice thing is that they learn from each other. But the thing I find most interesting is that like pirate AI, because like that is in a sense the first time where not following IP rules gives you an advantage. Before it's like, okay, you can download stuff illegally for yourself, but you can't build a business off of like doing illegal stuff. But like training an AI, once it's trained, you can then just like, and of course you can't really prove, I don't know how you can prove what things the AI trained on. So I don't. I feel that I don't know enough to say anything smart technologically or from a legal perspective about it. But I am excited that it's a new technological Cold War, which will keep people improving. And I'll give you an example. There's all these really stupid decelerationist that say AI is using too much energy. It's like it's
No, that's a stupid argument.
right? And then what do they say? We have to prove that the benefits of AI are bigger than the huge cost of all the energy it uses. And I just replied to the tweet is like, okay, but what are you going to do about it? Like, how are you going to prove? How are you going to, what happens if someone disagrees and says, to me, it's really valuable. I really like it. So like, are you going to stop me? And then the last thing I'll say before I transfer it over to you is like, you have all these from the 60s or 70s, people said, oh, we don't need more than 64 kilobytes of RAM. We would never need, because like back then, they looked at the most powerful computer and did like 100x of that. And they say, we'll never need more. The thing is, you always need more, right? So now there's legislation from the Biden administration that basically says above a certain compute, you'll have to like get a license or something. And they took like, the most powerful computer times 10, it's not going to be enough in a couple of years. And then once you have the law or the executive order or whatever, it's going to be really hard to repeal it. So I just want the government to not meddle in it. But and because they'll have the competition from China and from the open source AI, they'll understand that they cannot meddle. Because like, okay, if in the US you can't train the models, I'll train them in India. I'll just buy a bunch of chips from NVIDIA, ship them to India. Or like, I don't know, are they going to do a choke point on the chips? It's going to be interesting. What do you think?
I think this aversion to AI because of energy is completely overblown. The energy argument, I think, is dying out. With the Russia-Ukraine war exposed the need for energy independence and energy security, I think that we clearly see that nuclear is the way to go. So you can't be against energy or usage and then also be against nuclear. I think that faction is becoming smaller and smaller and is dying out. Nobody that's serious, even if you're left-leaning and you want to protect the climate, which I would love to protect the climate, but it's like you can't complain about everything. Be like, there's a problem, but then also say no to every single solution. And the solution isn't just use less of stuff. It's like, okay, you bring up this point a lot. Throughout humanity, progress has been measured in the amount of more energy used, not less. So just using less energy, and it's like in the US, I think in the 90s or in the 80s somewhere, there was this whole campaign about, there was the rise of HIV/AIDS. It's like, don't have sex. It's like, okay, people aren't going to stop having sex. It's just not practical. Same thing during COVID. Remember during COVID, it was like, sure, you can have sex, but face away from each other and do it only in this position because you're not breathing. It's like, okay, so it's like, don't use energy. Stop using energy. It's like, okay, we'll use energy. We're human beings. Now we can try to do a different energy mix, right? Or let's bring on more green or renewable sources, which I firmly believe nuclear is one. So I don't really buy that argument. The argument about there's an interesting argument to be talked about open source or closed source AI. I actually don't agree that China is going to have the super AI model or whatever the heck it is, because it's censored data. So you're not going to be able to, it won't work in the West. Yeah, maybe for China, for the CCP, it will be a good model, but it won't be a good Western model. And that's all you need to know. AI is global. AI, there's no country borders, physical borders don't matter for AI. So if you're training AI on wrong or corrupted data, as we see in these countries, China, Russia, and so on, the data is corrupt. What information flow is corrupt. You only say what makes your boss the good, what makes his boss the good, and all the way up to the chairman, right? It's all yes men and women up and down the chain.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not real. It's not real. Um, and AI is garbage in, garbage out. And this is going to be absolute garbage in. And after a while, it'll look good, and then it'll fail.
Yeah, you raise a really interesting point. I didn't think of the censorship part. Um, yeah, that basically if you censor a part of the speech, then by definition, the AI will not be able to reason along those lines. Very
You
interesting.
can't.
Yeah.
Or you'll reason with the wrong fallacies. A plus B equals C when you're like A plus B actually equals D. Like if you do X policies, the people will rise up against you. Won't be popular. But the AI is trained. If you do X policies, people love you. You're like, keep on doing this, and then it will just essentially push. It'll push towards completely um, ineffective or suboptimal outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And then what? So I think sooner or later, and AI actually accelerates time frames. I think sooner or later we're going to see a differentiation. Also, AI is accretive, exponentially growing, so it learns upon itself and becomes better and better. If you're learning on wrong and censored and biased data, it's almost like, remember when you were in school and you did a math problem. It's like a very complex math problem. If you got step one wrong, everything else is going to be wrong, even if everything else is done correctly. Well, if the data is wrong, then all the other outcomes and learning upon itself is going to be wrong.
You just triggered me because I was really, really bad at those. When you need the attention to data, I actually got a really good score. I think the perfect score for the final kind of state exam in Israel in math, because like those final state exams were about proving theorems and stuff. It wasn't about like doing all these like multiple steps. I always would get them wrong, and I would always get so upset because my attention to detail isn't the best.
Well, you mentioned something before and we talked. No, I didn't want to come back to the economy, so this is how I want to come back. You said it's not priced in yet, the fact that we have the Vision 3, the Vision Pro, right? And I agree it's not priced in, but how do you think it's going to change the economy?
Well, I just think so. That's another interesting conversation I had yesterday in New York, which is like when you look at price earnings, it's all in dollars, right? So, like, my thesis is just basically the amount of dollars will increase because, like, the deflation from tech will be so huge um, that the government can print more, and then the price to earnings, right? It's the price today, but the earnings are in future dollars. And if people believe that more dollars will be printed in the future than the historical rate, like let's say you get like 7 or 8%. I forgot Saifedean Ammous's figure of like on average currencies are debasing at like 7% or 8% per year. That's like a weighted average based on the power of the currency. So it's not like Venezuela is, inflating much more, but they're a smaller piece of the overall pie. So he did a weighted average. So like if it goes from 7% to 9%, because you get another 2% of productivity because of Apple Vision Pro and because of the robots and all of these things, then it can permanently change the price to earnings ratio of the stock market. So that's my thesis. My thesis is that looking at previous historical data on price to earnings is not, we're not necessarily going to revert to that mean. And that's a very unpopular opinion. Like most people basically say it's unsustainable to pay to pay basically 35, let's say a price to earnings ratio of 35 means like it takes you 35 years to, if you put $1 now, it takes you 35 years of dividends to bring it back. But that's only assuming that the dividends continue at the same rate. And again, the key point that I think people miss is that the dividends are in US dollars. And so if the US dollars increase in the economy, the dividends increase, even if the profitability of the company doesn't increase. So that's my thesis. Very unpopular, but
That's great to know. It's a fantastic thesis. I want to show you something that's somewhat related. Let me share my screen really quickly. Um, Share this screen. And now this is coming to you live, ladies and gentlemen. Shimon hasn't seen this before, and it's going to be live. So Paul Krugman basically wrote a little bit ago. I'm going to read it for those of you who can't see it. Immigration is looming large in the campaign, partly because it's becoming harder for Republicans to run against Biden and the economy. The economy is booming. But there's a strong case that immigration has been a key part of Biden's economic success. Inflation has come down so easily, in part because of strong labor force growth. How much of that growth can be attributed to foreign-born workers? All of it. And we could see native-born has dipped pretty much zero, and foreign-born has increased in terms of changes in labor force from 2020 to 2024. And then he says, some people might look at that and say, well, foreigners have stolen 3 million jobs from Americans, but we have full employment. Indeed, a very tight labor market. Look at what the Confidence Board survey says. Basically, 50% of consumers, nearly 50, say the jobs are plentiful, up from 40%. So it went up by 5% in December. And then he talks about, so employment is being constrained by supply, not demand. Foreign workers expand the supply, and lots of evidence that they are complementary to native-born workers, so that they let us run the economy hotter without inflation, and hence raise native-born employment.
mm-hmm.
There's two more things. What do you think about this thread?
Well, I mean, part of it I completely agree with it, and part of it I completely disagree with it. I completely agree. I mean, there were just like a lot in the news. I don't remember where, but I definitely saw that the native population is stagnant, and the illegal immigration is going up. So, like, of course, if one population is stagnant and the other one is going up, and you have full employment, all the job gains will come from immigrants.
Yeah,
So, like, with that part, I completely agree. Because, like, I always think, immigration is a good thing, and we've spoken about this so many times. So I completely agree with him there. What I completely disagree is, like, no, it's not about the immigration and all of that stuff. The economy is not really strong. It's really strong for people like us who have assets. But the biggest problem with the economy is that the number of goods are not increasing, but the number of money units are increasing. And so what happens is, yeah, everybody's fully employed, but that doesn't mean the economy is strong. I really don't think that. I've never met someone who said, "Oh yeah, things now are much better than like in when Trump was president." Like economically, I'm just talking economically. People who
yeah,
talk politically or culturally for sure, but economically, I just don't think. And I've shared on my Twitter feed lots of statistics, right, of like rents versus incomes, right? The rent growth is outpacing the growth in incomes. Food versus incomes, right? All of these things. So I think Paul Krugman is like the normal mainstream defend the Democrat administration guy. So of course he's going to say, "Look over here, it's all about immigration. Let's talk about that." I'm saying I'm all for immigration. Immigration is great, but if you wouldn't have printed all this money, everybody would have been better off. And the other problem is, and this is Peter St. Onge, I really recommend you guys follow him on Twitter. He basically said all this job growth is government jobs. So, like, okay, you can say that he has a very kind of libertarian take, which basically says, "Oh, it's terrible that the government is the only thing growing the jobs." Like, okay, it's not necessarily terrible, but I just think that the government is less efficient at doing stuff than the private sector. So if you didn't have all this growth in the government jobs, these people would have been employed in the private sector, which would have
yeah,
been better for GDP. And that's the one thing that Krugman never talks about, which is like, is this the best we can do? And it's crazy when people on MSNBC and stuff, they basically say, the economy is doing great and people are just stupid for not realizing it. I mean, if you start saying that people are stupid it's like, sorry, but the people are voting, so it doesn't matter if they're stupid or not. What really matters is like, do you deliver a good quality of life for people? Now, all that being said, I don't think the US is in a terrible spot right now. So I don't want to be doom and gloom, but I definitely think that it's really stupid to say like, oh, you can't attack them on the economy, so you attack them on immigration. I completely disagree there. What do
I
you think?
had a slightly different take. I think, this whole thing, inflation is dead. The change in inflation has gone down, right? But nominal prices are high. $7 for a carton of eggs. It's ridiculous.
Hmm.
So, like you said, people with assets are fairly okay. Your cash doesn't feel the same anymore. And people with no assets, middle class and lower, are not okay. The other thing is this job no these job numbers are of a mirage. People are working two jobs just to get by. So what does that mean? How do you different employment surveys, household versus like ADP reports, are reporting different things. So when you look at ADP, you're counting all of these jobs and how tight the market is. But actually, yeah, people are just working two jobs to get by. So the economy, the other we have. I don't think the economy is doing. Maybe it's not terrible. I don't fully understand why we haven't gone into a recession yet. But debt is on the rise. Consumer savings from COVID is pretty much done.
Hmm.
We're stopping the bank term funding program,
Hmm.
and we're already seeing pressure. Last couple of days, the small, medium banks have been under complete pressure. Some stocks have crashed by 40%.
Hmm.
So, we're, and like you said, what's keeping us afloat is government spend. There was this Zero Hedge came out with a chart that said that change to projected GDP went up by like 300 billion for the fourth quarter, but the debt to projected debt spend went up by 500 billion.
Yeah,
So you're spending 500 more billion than usual to get 300 more billion than usual GDP. That's not efficient at all. This to your point, the government is not efficient. You're losing money.
you completely hit the nail on the head. Of like, how much do you have to spend to get $1 of GDP?
Yeah. And so it's like, if I open up 10 credit cards, borrow against them, you know, and then say, well, look, and put all that money in the bank. And it's like, well, look at that. Our bank accounts are restored. No, they're not. You have debt, right? So like our GDP is not humming along because we have debt. We took out debt to create this GDP. That's not organic GDP growth.
Yeah.
And it's
Now,
coming from government spending.
yeah, but then again, just to not be doom and gloom, the US is doing better than other countries. So
For
I
sure.
would say government spending in the US could maybe be even better than private sectors in Europe because of the crazy regulations there. So I want to show you a chart of like why I think I'm super optimistic. And in that sense, I kind of agree with Krugman, which is like, we shouldn't have a doom and gloom like mindset. So check this out. This is Germany, the industrial production.
Yeah.
So notice how, forget about COVID, but it's just like 12% down in 6 years, right? This is a structural problem. And it's mainly probably because of the Russian energy stuff. But again, the war in Russia started only around here in the last two bars here. So it's just like a steady, steady, steady decline in the industrialism of Germany, which is the industrial powerhouse of Europe. For those of you who don't know, like literally anything, I go visit Bulgaria, like literally everything there is either Chinese or German. There's no industry or anything that's made in France. I mean,
Yeah.
France, I guess, does a little bit of airplanes and stuff, but Germany is much more. So the US has Tesla and SpaceX and all of these like cool things, and I'm actually very excited about Anduril and all the private, startups that are disrupting defense contractors. So like
Yeah.
all the dynamism is here. So in that sense, yeah, I'm optimistic, but it could have been so much better. That's the problem. If we wouldn't have printed this money, and if we wouldn't have, it's more than that. It's not just printing the money. It's the fact that people vote for policies that are suboptimal. If we could somehow protect the value from the people who vote for suboptimal policies, we could have been working 10 hours per week and had the rest of the time to hang out with our kids. And
You
that's what,
can't have that and have an efficient democracy.
yeah, exactly. Because then people will vote and say, oh, why don't we work a little bit more and give it to the poor people? And it's like, I can't really
Yeah,
argue with that because, like, as long as we have a democratic system, each vote counts equally. So, what are you going to do? Buy Bitcoin, right? That's my thesis for Bitcoin.
yeah,
It's like the one thing you can do to protect your stuff from the votes of people that want to take it from you.
yeah. Listen, I agree. Otherwise, we become the deep state that everybody talks about, not in a cynical sense, but just the institutional. The whole point of this bureaucracy is to say, well, people don't really know. They're stupid to vote for what they need, so we'll do it for them. And it's like hubris to basically say that we know more than the people, even though I agree that many people who vote aren't the most educated in the topics they're voting for. You have enough that are, but you have a lot, probably the majority that aren't.
Hmm.
So, yeah,
And again, that's not to criticize people. Like, I would think that if I went to Mars on Elon's spaceship, and then everybody there had like like IQ that's much 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 higher than me, I probably shouldn't get the vote there. You know, like, because no, seriously, and that's a different form of government. I really think that at some point we'll have to develop different forms of government because, like, it's really a problem when most people, to your point, are not educated. They can't even, you don't have to think that they're bad. You just have to say they can't project the implications. When Trump says, oh, I'm gonna put a 10% tariff on everything, and everybody's like, yeah, USA, it's like, do you realize that, like, a tariff from things in China, they'll slap a tariff on your stuff that's going over there? So
yeah.
it's like, they just, I
Or
don't
the
expect
tax on a
them.
tariff comes from the domestic country.
Exactly. So I don't expect voters to be able to understand that. Both of us are like highly trained, like we have like master's degrees in economy. Like, it's so how do you, yeah, and it's interesting because, like, I also had like some discussions with people at work about this. This is a 2,000-year problem. Like, Aristotle and Plato and Socrates were talking about sophists, right? That can sway the demagogues, and sophists that can sway the opinion of the
Yeah,
masses. And it's an intractable problem because, like, yeah, if you don't give people the vote, then you get a tyrant. But if you do give people the vote, then you get like a suboptimal thing. So that's why I'm excited about like these three blocks competing with each other, and I really think this is going to define this century. It's like a new Cold War. I mean, in Israel now, many people are talking about how this war in Gaza is literally a proxy war. Ukraine and Gaza are a proxy war of the Cold War between like Russia, Iran, the US, and then China is somewhere in the middle, kind of meddling. But it is a new Cold War, and it's like, seriously, and it really gets to grotesque things when people in in the news in Israel are like, why should our soldiers die for like the USA's interest in the South China Sea? And literally they had, yeah, because it was like this analyst analyzed everything, how like, yeah, if Gaza falls, then Taiwan will fall, and Ukraine and all of that. And it's like, what are you going to do about it? Like, are you going to join Iran? No. Are you going to join China? No. So you don't have an option. Like, we're a tiny country of 10 million people that gets most of the shells and guns and
yeah.
stuff from the US. So what's your alternative? You have to defend the South China Sea or whatever that is. And that's just the price of whatever. I don't know. I mean, I wish we could all just live in peace. Just think about it. If Putin hadn't invaded, right, everything would have been so much better. Think of the GDP lost from like all the people who died and all the people who were injured and all the people, and all the
Yeah.
pipelines that were blown. It's just like a destruction of quality of life just because of one stupid person. It's just so painful. But I mean, yeah, it's the reality. Like, there are bad people in the world, so we have to somehow stop them. I don't know, and it's just very sad.
What was that movie with Tom Cruise, Vanilla Sky, or when they're like they can foresee crimes that are gonna happen in the future, so they
Oh
stop.
yeah, my
Minority Report. Yeah, there we go. By the way, we should wrap up. And next time, I do want to talk about military technology, drones versus expensive weapons, because we're seeing now the old guard, the U.S. and NATO and so on, getting owned
yeah.
by small little $100, $500 drones. And when I mean now by own, like the drones aren't breaking hulls, although it was very close to a U.S. ship a few days ago. They just were
Mhm.
using an $100,000 rocket. to knock down an $100 drone. And inevitably, unless the U.S. changes its military-industrial complex to go into the drone warfare, this thing is it makes the GDP fight. We talked about how wars are GDP versus GDP. It completely asymmetrically flips the economics on GDP
But
fights.
why do you think that the US can't just like copy exactly?
There are all these reports we should talk about next time, but there are all these reports coming out of Ukraine how they're kind of prodding the US, like, hey guys, like you're behind the times. Because we're seeing it change in Ukraine. US and all the warships and all the aircraft carriers, a very expensive weaponry. We don't have the kind of drone capabilities that we need at scale.
So exactly, and I have to show you something really cool. And with that, um, we can
Wrap it up.
wrap it up, which is Anduril, which is my favorite company because they. Sorry, if you're over 50, you don't want to use. So check this out. They are a startup. And it's cool because it's this guy, Palmer Luckey. He invented Oculus, sold it to Facebook, and then started a defense startup. Amazing guy. And he always goes with Hawaiian shirts and flip flops to pitch to the Pentagon. Like it's really really cool. And so basically, he's like exactly what you're saying, which is like it's not enough to just like recreate whatever the enemy is doing. We have to be like much better than them. So he developed this thing which is called the Roadrunner, which is a jet powered drone that basically it's an autonomous jet powered drone uh, designed to serve as an interceptor of aerial threats, ranging from large drones to manned aircraft. And the trick here, if I understand correctly, I'm not like a military expert, is that this thing is jet powered and a drone has the stupid propellers, so you can always take out a drone. Because basically, if you're faster, you can, hit it before it hits you. So check this out. I hope you like my scientific explanation
I love it.
how this works. Uh, okay, let's see here.
Well,
This
that's
is
pretty
something
cool.
that only a startup can develop. It's a jet, right? It can kill anything and it can land.
It was kind of hard to hear you for a little bit, but this is pretty cool.
So basically, the idea is we took Elon Musk's idea of like a rocket that lands itself and said, like, if we do a drone that's like a rocket instead of like something with a little fan, uh, it can just like kill everything else and just land itself. And that solves the problem of like the high cost of a missile. The high cost of a missile is because like you don't reuse it. You shoot the missile and you can't recover it. Versus here, it has some sort of warhead or something, so it can just like go explode the drone and come back. So
Super
my point
cool.
is, innovation will solve that too, and that's a great example of how having pressure from Russia, having pressure from Iran, is pushing us to invest in the frontier. I mean, you gotta love the USA. We're always at the frontier. Once we decide to do something, we're always at the frontier. The problem is it takes us forever to decide. Like, look at nuclear energy. I'm sure the US can build much better nuclear reactors than the Chinese or the South Koreans, which are, I just know because my father was a nuclear engineer. But basically, the US hasn't built anything like in forever in terms of nuclear reactors. And so, like, if the proverbial stuff hits the fan, I'm sure we can have a startup that builds nuclear reactors and get a lot of funding and just like it solve the energy problem. But like that's the hopeful Shimon speaking.
On on this note, on the note of we love the US, and like Churchill said, the US does the right thing after exhausting all other options.
Exactly. The
So
US always does the right thing,
always
but only after exhausting all the other options.
on this note, our friends, Military Tech, next episode. Like us,
We should
subscribe
get a
us, send us
guest.
more
We should
feedback.
get a guest to talk about drones and military stuff because I really don't understand it. I mean, I don't
Let's
have
do
the
it.
knowledge, and
Yeah,
I bet our audience would love it.
We can, but let's find someone and do it. All right, Shimon, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure.